welcome to Paperback Flicks.
Yeah, welcome back, everybody. We are talking Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And so I don't have a ton to say about the book, but you hadn't read the book before, is that right?
Until now, yeah, I hadn't read it.
Okay. So what was your takeaway? Like, how did you feel? Because I know you've seen the movies before.
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel about the book?
It was fun. I enjoyed the book. It was very whimsical, and I liked the way it was told. There are things that are in the book that I didn't realize. Like, it's kind of fun to read the book because actually, in a way, it made me appreciate the remake more because they did a lot of things that were from the book that the 1970s movie didn't do.
Mm-hmm.
And so that made me appreciate those little additions, the things that they put in there. Overall, I think it comes off a lot more whimsical and sweet and innocent
Mm-hmm.
in the book than it does as a movie. Like, I don't know. It's funny. It's when I was watching the remake last night, like I kept thinking, as a parent, this would be horrific to watch these things happen to your kids. But I grew up with this movie, with the story, you know? And so I was always seeing it from the perspective of the kid until now. And I'm like watching this going, oh, as a parent, holy crap, this would be just horrific.
Yeah.
To see these things happen to your kids. I'd be like, oh. And I always thought it was funny that how Willy Wonka is kind of like, oh no, don't do it. Oh no. But like he doesn't seem that concerned. It was funny growing up, but as a parent, I'm like, oh man, I would deck him. Yeah. There's no way I would be as calm as these parents are. I would like, man, get my kid out of that chocolate. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, and that was so. I watched the Nostalgia Cast talking about the 71. Okay, so the Gene Wilder.
The Gene Wilder, yes.
So and Phoenix was their guest. I forgot his last name. I didn't write it down.
Phoenix Clouden, I think.
Clouden, yeah. But and he's like talking about how it looks like an analogy for like the devil and hell and how it's like, look, isn't it so nice? And then you're evil. Punished for your sins.
Like demons and
yeah. And I was like, I had never taken it that way, but I could see it when he was talking about it. But I grew up with Roald Dahl. Like it was not like we in our household, like we'd say, like, Dr. Seuss, we love Dr. Seuss. But we never were like, oh my gosh, I love Roald Dahl. However, all of his stories are the stories that I grew up with. Like Matilda and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and James and the Giant Peach. Like those are the books that we were reading, the stories that we were I don't know what the word is, not raised by, but you know what I mean? Like all through our formative years were saturated with Roald Dahl. And so because I knew that it was an innocent story, like when you read the book, I was like, oh, I didn't see what Phoenix saw, but people that just saw the movie cold and didn't know the story, I see how he's like, no, stop, don't. You know, like, you're gonna do what you're gonna do, whatever. Oh no. You know, I'm like, oh yeah, that is kind of, because when you're reading the book, it's like, no, stop, don't, like it's exclamation points.
Yeah, he's much more like concerned. He's like, no, don't do that, kid.
Yeah.
You know? But like, it's almost like he didn't realize how dangerous his factory was until he brought kids into it. And he's like, oh, wait, this maybe wasn't the best idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I feel like the book is told the way that a kid would tell a story, you know? It's Charlie loved chocolate more than anything in the world. And Willy Wonka is just crazy and whimsical and exactly what a little boy would dream up if he was dreaming out, like how I want to be when I grow up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's how everything was. Everything was so fantastic. It was like what a kid would dream up as the coolest, you know, prize in the world, a lifetime supply of chocolate, you know.
Your own chocolate factory.
Yeah, like that's the coolest thing to an 11-year-old boy, or you know, like,
Yeah.
That's how the book reads. And so anytime when you're talking about the movies, they always have their own interpretations, and they always try to make it too like Gene Wilder. They didn't really give him a script, I guess. They just kind of like he knew the story, and they just kind of gave him like, and Willy Wonka will say something here. And there are a few lines that are iconic from the book that are in there, but he did it. He did all of the weird little quirks that we know Willy Wonka for, the walking out with the walking stick and then somersaulting,
Yeah.
and like he thought up all of those little things that made Willy Wonka what he is, which is fun. I love it, but it changes the story from this innocent story to this almost maniacal, like yeah, like I'm gonna get him kind of
Almost
guy.
like he knew these were bad kids and he went and found the worst kids and made sure they got a ticket so he could punish them for their badness. And
Yeah,
then he randomly just showed up right before Charlie did. Put that particular bar right there and then dropped the money. And they're like, oh, hey, little kid. And then ran off.
yeah,
So that Charlie would get that candy bar. It was almost like he planned it. Like all
yeah.
these kids were handpicked, including Charlie.
It does kind of feel like that.
Yeah.
And so something that I thought was okay, so this is the book is really Charlie's story.
Mm-hmm.
The movies I feel like are all Willy Wonka. Like you're there to see Willy Wonka. You kind of don't care about Charlie. Like
Mm-hmm.
in kind of either one, even the Johnny Depp one. Like he's a little. I forget the name of that actor. I actually really like him that plays Charlie.
Charlie, yeah.
I really like him. He's one of my favorite actors, but he like you almost don't care. He's almost just there just to push the story along. It's
Mm-hmm.
always Willy Wonka's story. And then you have Wonka, which is all about his
40 years younger, yeah.
yeah,
Becoming the chocolatier or whatever.
so my daughters and I were kind of talking about it because we've seen all of them 100,000 times. I don't know. But and so we were talking about it, and we were like, I don't like the multiverse theory. I feel like that's kind of a Deus Ex Machina thing. Like, I told the story. I told the story, but it's different. Multiverse.
Multiverse.
Like, I don't like that. But what I do like is that all of them can exist because we were talking about how like in Wonka,
Mm-hmm.
the prequel, right?
Yeah.
In Wonka, he only has his mom. It's him and his mom on a riverboat somewhere, right?
Yeah.
In the Johnny Depp version, his backstory is with his dad. And so
Yeah.
we were like, so not quite multiverse, but here's this little boy, Willy Wonka. Obviously, his parents are not together and they're very different people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if these two people had a baby and he grew up with dad, here's how he becomes what he ultimately was destined to become. If
Mm-hmm.
he grows up with mom, here's how he grows up to be who he ultimately becomes.
Yeah.
Like once I saw it that way, I was like, ooh, that's kind of an interesting take on it.
Or what just occurred to me is what if he grew up with his dad, but then when his dad's like, get out of here, no son of mine's gonna be a chocolatier, he ran off to find mom and lived on the boat with her, and then he became he went on to become
Yeah.
the Wonka we know. So yeah, either way, I mean, they're all interesting takes on the same story.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's mainly about Wonka. Wonka is the character you're there for, that you're interested by, you're intrigued by, and of course the factory itself is its own entity.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny with like the movies, you spend so much time, you forget sometimes when you haven't watched it in a while, like how much time is spent out of the factory just leading up to getting to the factory.
Yeah.
And then you're like, we haven't even gotten to the factory yet, and you're like halfway through the movie. But at the same time, there's a lot of fun things, like I talked about on Nostalgia Cast, a lot of fun little quirky things they put into the 1970s version. as like, showing all the chaos of the world and all the crazy things they're doing. And I really loved that aspect of that movie because it has, the quirky thing with the machine that can tell you where to find it. How? I don't know
Yeah.
how. It doesn't make any sense to me how a machine could. But I love that the machine's like, what would I do with chocolate?
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not gonna tell you, that's cheating. But like apparently the machine has sense of morality. But
Well, right. And then I love the guy's response. I'm now telling the computer exactly what
I
it
what it
can
could do with
do.
a lifetime of chocolate.
I
Yeah,
love that. Well,
that
and
was
it's
pretty funny.
briefly explained in the book. Like that was the beautiful thing about the book is that he's like the tickets went out all over the world and these guys were doing this and there was something going on over here and a guy made a machine that was supposed to calculate where they're going to be and he
Hmm.
can just throw out this list of things that are happening and it's easy to overlook it. But yeah, when they took the time to like the lady with the ransom call, they're like, I just want my
Yeah.
husband back, and then they're like, they want your last box of chocolates, and she's like, how long do they will they give me,
How long
or
do I
whatever.
have to consider? Like she
Yeah.
was gonna give him anything until there was like, oh, it's the Wonka chocolate. I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah. So I love that. I love that they included those.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. I all those things, sure. Good times, good fun. I liked some of the things they did in the remake as far as showing chaos and the crazy. So I'm a Tim Burton fan, so I
Mhm.
love some of like the very Tim Burton isms that he does, and he likes to have quirky worlds, but with a sense of like order happening, like a sense
Mhm.
of like everything's being done on purpose, even if it seems like it's chaos. So like even like in the um Veruca Salt's dad's peanut factory, when they're like shelling, they start shelling the candy bars. They show them do everything like very orderly and like there's like a rhythm to how they do everything.
Mhm.
And that's one of those things that Tim Burton does that I've always loved. I love the weird quirkiness, but then there's like rhythm happening. There's like a pattern going on. So I don't know. That's one of the things I've always liked about him. Um, so in some ways, that made those aspects of the story more interesting. Yeah, like the beginning of the story, as much as I love the 70s one, I do. I love all the quirky little things. The beginning of the story with Charlie and showing the whole like how the whole thing goes down, in some ways is better in the remake because of how they introduce each character is a little more interesting. It's done in a more interesting fashion.
Mhm.
Also having like the grandpa kind of talk about Willy Wonka's history and sort of seeing it, sort of seeing him in like his
Yeah.
little shop and then seeing him, when he first opened up the factory and like kind of, I like the idea of the grandpa being a former worker at the factory. I always have. I was like, that's a good touch because you kind of wonder why Grandpa Joe is so obsessed with Wonka in the first place. And it's never explained in the book and it's not explained in the other movie. But if he used to work for him, and he
Yeah.
used to like idolize this guy and had total respect for him. And then he lost his job, which that's the thing. Again, as an adult watching that where he fires all his employees, I'm like, that poor flipping town. That was probably like a huge godsend when when that factory opened up. And then now everybody's poor. No wonder like Charlie's parents can't afford anything. Like all the factories are hiring either little Oompa people or machines
Yeah.
and like nobody can make a living in this town. Like, yeah. So again, I'm seeing it as an adult, like imagining all these people getting laid off and like how horrible that would have been for the town,
Right.
But at the same time, I like the idea of Grandpa Joe being a former employee getting to go back into the factory after all this time where he used to work. So something like, for a company he used to love and be a part of. I like that. So then suddenly it makes sense that Grandpa Joe's so excited to get to
Yeah.
go back.
Yeah. Like that was always kind of one thing in the because okay, so in the 70s movie, in the book, it makes perfect sense because, of course, everything is the extreme, right? In the
Mm-hmm.
book, they're all the grandparents are in their 90s and they're all, these poor people that have worked and slaved their whole lives and now they're so poor that they all have to share one big bed and it makes sense. And then you watch the movie and you see these like grandparents, but like I don't know, like I'm like, get out of bed, get a job. Like
I know, right? Like, again, as an
He makes
adult,
mention of that.
they could be helping out somehow.
Yeah. And
And
I was like,
yeah,
I remember kind of thinking the same thing. Like, maybe not all four of them could be out working. Maybe they could, but like how the mom is a laundress and she's
hmm
like slaving all day at this just to make enough to like have cabbage soup, or
I
whatever.
know
Like,
that's not very much. That's a
yeah.
really bad paying job.
And then for him to just be like, a golden ticket, I've got a golden ticket. And he's like bouncing around. I'm like,
Like,
you, sir,
you were
didn't need to
faking it.
be.
You are full of crap. Well, the one
Yeah.
thing that's nice about the 1970s one, when Grandpa Joe gets out of bed at first, he's like, "Help me, Charlie," and like he kind
Hmm.
of wobbly at first. Whereas like the remake, they just have to have Grandpa Joe just hop right out, like do 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 do, and does a
Yeah.
little jig, like nothing's wrong with him. And you're like,
Hmm.
"What the heck's going on here?
You
Like,
spent
why would you
40
purposely
years in bed?
spend 20 years in a bed?
Yeah.
Three other people, only one of them being your spouse, the other two being, I guess they're not strangers anymore, but essentially your in-laws. I don't know anybody likes their in-laws that much, but they would be 20 years in the same bed. I'm like, that's not possible. You would have to get out of bed and you would have to
Yeah.
change the bed at some point. So like, what do you do when you change the bed? Like, I know it's a silly book, and that's part of like the whimsy and the fun of Roald
Right.
Dahl is that he comes up with these ridiculous, over the top scenarios that couldn't happen in real life. That's part of what makes it seem fun and magical.
Right.
But the idea of that these parents have to take care of their parents and their one child, and you're like, why didn't you guys have any other kids? Should be a lesson to Charlie's parents. Have more kids. So when you get old and decrepit, you have multiple children who can help take care of you instead of putting it all on one child.
Although, if both of your parents are in your tiny little one-room shack,
Yeah.
how do you have any
Again,
kids?
you're right. There's enough room for brothers and sisters, I guess. But it's like, Charlie, we don't want you to have to take care of us. Like, we have to take care of our parents, but it works out for them. The Charlie inherits a
Right.
factory, so they don't have to worry about that anymore. But I don't know. I guess because I'm the youngest of eight kids. I don't understand people having one child or two children. Like, it never made sense to me. Like, if you can have more than two, then I'm all for big families.
Yeah.
So I just feel sad for only children. That's one of the things that also made me sad about Charlie's story is he's an only child.
Yeah.
But then it seems like all the kids in this story are. Do any of these kids have siblings?
I don't know, but their siblings don't matter if they do. I'm trying to remember if they specifically talk about siblings. I don't think they do. But that's kind of part of the thing is part of the maybe they do. But they're all just so selfish and self-involved,
Yeah,
that like
it's possible.
other people don't matter. And I know in the book there's a lot more mom and dad. There was
Yeah,
several of them that mom and dad count, or
yeah.
whatever.
And I like that they changed it in the movies. It's practical as far as that casting and like
Mhm.
visually. Plus, it's kind of throwaway to have a second parent when like the one parent can say and do all those things. Plus, it was so cluttered having both
Yeah.
parents there.
Well, and it doesn't push it doesn't help the story,
Mhm.
But they do show like in both like Veruca Salt's parents, her mom is always part of it, you
Mhm.
know. Charlie, for some reason, Charlie's mom is a single mom in the one
Yeah,
movie,
in the
but he's
70s
got
one.
his
Yeah.
both parents that.
But she's got
So
her in-laws there still.
you
Yeah.
do kind of see that, and it gives the good juxtaposition between like parents and how parents are supposed to care about you, and Willy Wonka, who doesn't need to care about you, like,
Yeah.
and kind of his like you said, his factory is not safe for children. It may not be safe for anyone, but
Mm.
like as he's going along and he's like, oh man, I never thought about it from a parent's perspective. He's
Yeah.
like, oh, children, don't do that. Why would you do that? Because they're kids. They're gonna do that,
Yeah. And like he might
But
think of himself as young at heart and the kid is in his head, but like he's not. So
yeah. And then to see the adults, the parents that are supposed to be like, they're the ones that should have thought of that, and they don't like to watch them just be like, go ahead, honey. What's that? Whatever. What's the gum taste like?
yeah.
And not being responsible. That's kind of a Roald Dahl staple. Is that
Mm-hmm. Irresponsible parents.
yeah, irresponsible parents. Like I don't know. as a
Yeah.
young mom, when I think it was Matilda that we were reading, um, I was reading to my kids or whatever, and I was like, just so you know, most parents are not like this. Like,
Yeah. This is not, no.
just look real bad, you know. But
Hmm.
kind of all of the Charlie is the only one with decent parents, it seems like, and
Well,
um,
in Witches, it seems like Luke had good parents before they died.
James and the Giant Peach, it's his aunts, and
Yeah, again, he
they're
had parents that
awful.
died, and now he has evil aunts.
Yeah,
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 there's a lot of that. Matilda had just horrible parents.
yeah.
So, yeah,
And in Willy Wonka, it seems like all of the other parents are kind of either neglectful or just straight up,
indulgent. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So I
And
kind of wonder
so,
if maybe this is like, in a way, if they are all only children, if this is like a commentary on how there is possible to raise a child as an only child and not spoil them. But it does seem to me, no offense, I don't want to offend all the single children out there, but not every only child kid I know is a little spoiled because he doesn't have the siblings. They don't understand certain aspects of family life because they didn't have siblings. So like if they have all their parents' attention, it's a different universe than when you're like the youngest of eight or you're in the middle of like six or something. Like
yeah,
when you're a part of a bigger family, your whole relationship with your parents and how you're raised is completely different. But like each one of these kids, if they're all single kids, these are all single kids, but under different circumstances and with different parents, different approaches. And it shows that it's really all about the parent and what the parent instills in the child and whether or not the child comes up well. Yeah,
yeah,
like certain characteristics are going to be in the kid. Like, you know, maybe Charlie would have always been a good kid no matter who his parents were. But maybe it has to do with the fact that he had nothing and his parents instilled with him that family was more important than stuff.
yeah,
That's why he's the way he is.
yeah.
Um, or I don't know. It could
So
be all sorts of things.
all the kind of almost unspoken commentary about the parents in the book, like he doesn't have to step out and say, no, her parents are overindulgent and his parents are neglectful. Like, he doesn't have to say that. You just
Mhm.
know, you watch Charlie's parents love him despite the fact that they're destitute and they can't love him the way they see
Yeah,
the
they
other
can't give
parents
him
love him.
all
You
the
know what I mean?
stuff,
Like,
but they love him. Yeah.
yeah, like you just see it in the interactions that you have with the parents, right? And
Mhm.
then in the movies, it's a lot easier to act that out. And some of the parents, some of them kind of chew the scenery. They're kind of really hammy, but it works because it is the story that it is.
Yeah.
And then how I was talking about how with Wonka, like you don't get his backstory in the book. Like you don't know how he grew up or whatever. But they are also the two the Johnny Depp and the Wonka are commentaries on raising children.
Uh-huh.
Like, like you see who he becomes when he's with his mother, and she's loving and she's not quite indulgent, but she's kind of like Charlie's parents. Like she's doing the best she can with what she's got, and
Yeah.
she
Doesn't have much, but she tries to give him all the love and all the support and like you can do anything. She's very
yeah, and
encouraging.
she has kind of that nurturing air about her. Whereas when you see how like father raises him and father is strict and whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of that like uh overbearing, I don't know the right
Father
word
figure.
to,
Yeah. Parental. Yeah. Like
yeah,
overprotective to the point that it's like stifling. Yeah.
correct, yeah. And so you see, like, again, like you said, like maybe Charlie would have been a good kid no matter his family situation. So kind of the same concept. Maybe Willy Wonka, like he was going to be this like eccentric
Yeah.
chocolatier, right?
No matter what. Yeah.
Yeah, and how he gets there. And so like to see the Johnny Depp version is a little bit crazy. He doesn't like people. He does kind of have a little bit of like, I'm just gonna be a kid because I didn't get to when I was a child, like,
Yeah. And you know, I
and
never really grew up, but
yeah.
somehow
Whereas
I'm terribly successful because I'm really good at what I do.
Yeah.
Good for
Whereas
you.
the Wonka and the 70s version.
70s, yeah.
Yeah, I just forget all the names. That's what I do. I forget names. But but
You got Willy
that
Wonka, then Charlie. So
yeah,
like the one movie's like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and then the other one's Charlie and the Chocolate
Charlie.
Factory.
Yeah. So the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, which the Wonka movie is more on that trajectory. It doesn't really have much to do with the Tim Burton version. Like
Yeah,
it follows the 70s version.
it's possible.
Um
Yeah,
and so like you anyway, you see how he still becomes the chocolatier, but now he had this nurturing upbringing or whatever with his
hmm,
mom, and then he's like, of course he's maybe a little bit not bitter, but almost callous. Like you see that young man Wonka, and he's
hmm,
just so optimistic, and people take advantage of him, and he's like,
hmm.
oh well, goodness will out in the end, right?
Yeah,
And then in the interim, in the part that you don't see on the movies, he has this factory, and within the factory, his people betray him because they're not
yeah,
really his people. They're with Prognos and
yeah,
whatever. And and so the betrayed old man, Willy Wonka, is still that young guy from Wonka, but he's a little bit jaded now. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like
This
he's
is his life's work. This is the most important thing in the world to him. So
yeah.
like to have people steal that, to take his ideas, things that he worked really hard on, like I can understand that as like a writer and artist, like when if somebody takes your ideas, there's something it's like someone stole your child and then like did something horrible to them. Like there's something very violating about someone taking something that you created, that you made, that's something very personal, and then just stealing it from you. There's yeah, even if it's yeah, not as traumatizing as an actual child being taken, but it's very emotional for a creative person to have
Yeah.
something they made taken because they put a lot of themselves into
Yeah.
what they make.
Well, and that's just it. He doesn't it the whole point of the golden tickets and whatever is because he doesn't have children, because this was his life. He lived for this candy factory, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so they came and they took what was the part of him, like
Mm-hmm.
him. They took part of him, you know? And so I kind of liked that like in the grand scheme of things, he still becomes a chocolatier either way. He still is betrayed either way. I liked that a little bit in the Johnny Depp version and also in Wonka, they had more than just Slugworth, because there in the book it was Slugworth was doing this and Prognos was doing this and
Mm-hmm.
Pickelgruber, like it does have those names in there, and it does talk about how it wasn't just one company that was like the other guy,
Yeah.
that all of these companies were taking from him and whatever. And so I like that they kind of make the, what do they call it in Wonka, the chocolate cartel.
Sure. Cartel. Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty funny.
But yeah, I like that. I like seeing, again, no one has to say, now his dad was really strict and mean. Like you just see it. They show you. They don't have to tell you, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the things I thought was interesting about the books that I forgot to say is that I didn't realize that all the Oompa Loompa songs are literally in the book.
Mm-hmm.
That so like the version that you see in the 70s one is more accurate to those songs because essentially word for word what you
Mm-hmm.
hear the Oompa Loompa sings is in that movie. So I grew up with that version of the Oompa Loompas, so I'm very attached to that. Plus,
Mm-hmm.
I'm totally against, and this is going to sound weird, maybe it won't, but I'm totally against taking parts from dwarves or little people, whatever you want to call them, and like, I don't understand this whole put one actor. So yeah, in the Johnny Depp one, it's still a dwarf, but they just use the same actor over and over and over and over again. I thought that was really weird. And I go there going for quirky or funny, and especially with having the women look exactly just like Deep Roy too.
Right.
Like, okay, that's kind of funny, but my thing is, okay, so you hired one actor, one dwarf actor got a job on a movie that's supposed to have like a slew of dwarf actors. And it's like, that's a lot of dwarves that would have had a job and more exposure, more work. I don't know why I'm so concerned about this. Maybe because I feel like, I don't know, I respect dwarves or something. Maybe because I'm a small, regular person. I respect little people.
Well, yeah. So we were talking about that with the whole Snow White thing. Like that's a separate thing.
Yes.
But yeah, that was a big controversy, And and I agreed with your sentiment that I was like, it's literally about dwarves. Like
Yeah, like they're an important character in this story.
Right. And I feel like with Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the Oompa Loompas, they are their own separate thing. Like I'm kind of okay with the concept that like Lord of the Rings, they have hobbits. Hobbits are supposed to be like proportional, just small. They almost look like children, even though they're like
like they're proportionally like regular people, but smaller.
Yeah, and the concept of the Tolkien dwarves are like they're like big beastie guys, and they live underground, and so
but they're still dwarves in like how they're built and compared to like the regular sized people,
right? So, and so I was fine with the concept of forced perspective, or sometimes they were using stunt doubles that but like I was okay with that because they were telling a story about a specific like it wasn't just the dwarves, the little people, whatever, it was. But then when you, like you said, like you give one person a job and you CGI a whole bunch of replicas, or you just almost CGI the whole thing, like there's not a real person or whatever, that really bothers me because I feel like I can, what is it called? Suspend my belief enough to like when you watch the 70s version and you've got all of these different guys, and sure, they all have the same makeup and hair and outfits. And that's enough for me to go, oh, a different race of people,
this is how they dress, or this is how they look, and that works. That's fine. But like, it's not the same person though. But you get like all the dances. So they have some fun dances they do in the 70s one. That like, especially like the one in the TV room that they do for some reason, like cracks me up every time I see it. Because they're dancing with other real people. It's real choreography.
Yeah.
And that's the other problem with so there's things they do in the newer version that makes so much sense because they're things that were in the book that they couldn't do in the 70s. Like they couldn't make squirrels attack a girl and knock on her head and then throw her down a garbage chute. They couldn't do that. So they did geese instead. Yeah. And just had her fall down this thing. Easy fix, right? Yeah. But in modern days, you can do that because we have that ability. And I thought they did a really good job with that scene. The squirrels were very believable and I liked it. It was good. I like seeing that version of that scene the way it was in the book. It's exactly the way it sounds. But at the same time, having everything else be so CGI, like when you first go into that main chocolate room, like the chocolate wonderland room, like in the 70s one, it felt like you walked into this like fabulous place and like it was just so magical. But in like the modern one, it felt like we just stepped into a CGI world and we've left reality. Which is, still sort of works for, the factory and all. But like, it had less of a homey lived in sense, less of like, I want to live here and I want to hang out with here. It felt a little more. So it's funny you mentioned Dr. Seuss. I think maybe Tim Burton's a Dr. Seuss fan. I can be wrong, but there's a lot of Dr. Seussiness about the designs and his things and like his chocolate room, like his main chocolate Wonderland room. Very Dr. Seussy to me. Yeah. And like it has more of a sense of something kind of sinister, and I'm not sure this is a safe place to be. And maybe that's what they're going for. Maybe they're going for less of a wonderland and more of like, is this something amazing? Is this like my dream come true or a nightmare? I'm not sure.
Yeah. So my younger kids are still like 12 and 10 or whatever. But they were like, "Oh, I don't want to watch that one. That one scares me." I'm like,
Oh, interesting.
"Okay." And yeah, the Johnny Depp one. My younger kids at least, they were like, "We don't want to watch that one." They did ultimately end up watching it with me, but they would like be in and out of the room, and they were like, "Oh, I guess it's not as scary. It was scarier when I was 4 or whatever."
Yeah,
But but yeah, it does kind of have more of like an eerie, creepy Tim Burton-y vibe, which, like you, like we grew up like loving Nightmare Before Christmas together and stuff like that. Like,
hmm
and so I do kind of have like my kids always make commentary. Like, I like stories that maybe don't have happy endings. I like the songs in a minor key. I love like Tim Burton to me is light and airy and cute and whimsical,
Yeah.
like I forget that for most people this is a macabre
Yeah.
scene, and so for me, like I was like, what are you talking about? What's scary about this? And then I would like after listening to Phoenix commentary about um the 70s version, and okay, I can see where he's coming from if you don't know the story behind it. Okay.
Yeah.
And then hearing my kids say, "Oh no, I'm scared of this one." And so I was looking at it like, what would be scary? And I'm like, "Oh, actually, yeah, okay." This is kind of the scary version of Willy Wonka, I
Yeah,
guess.
it's soothing. Yeah. So let's talk about really quick about Gene Wilder and Johnny Depp's, and then like we can also talk
Yeah.
about Timothy, um, who I'm not fond of. Anyways, so like their portrayals of Wonka. So starting with Gene Wilder, how do you feel about him?
So I loved Willy Wonka. Like, even understanding that he was purposeful in the like when you would watch the movie and you would go, yeah, he is taking this in a different direction from the book. But I loved it. I loved that kind. To me, it seemed like almost a parental figure, or like the uncle that like sees that my nephew is being raised to be a twerp, and so, oh
Makes
no,
sense. Yeah.
looks like you're gonna have to be put on a taffy puller now, like.
Ah.
But and then kind of the scene at the end where he's like in his office or whatever.
hmm
And I guess there's a lot of people that don't like that. They're like, they'll talk about how like, oh, that was like he went from this like, hey, I'm such a nice guy, and it's all a facade. I'm like, it's not a facade. Like, I
Genuine
love,
reason to be upset.
yeah, well, and I love to go have fun with my kids. And I work in the primary right now at church. So all of the like year and a half to 11-year-old kids, like I deal with them every Sunday and all the activities and whatever. And so I love to be like, it's me, let's have fun and whatever. But also I have to pay the bills and also go to bed and all, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that is how people are. I can be, having fun and talking about a fun movie and also, you know, and
hmm
I liked that you saw that kind of the same way you see Charlie before the chocolate factory. It's not just this like two-dimensional, I'm a good boy, I didn't do things wrong like the other kids. Like, you
hmm
actually see who he is a little bit, you see his life.
Yeah.
I like that you saw Wonka when he didn't get to be the fun guy that he wants to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Well, that's the thing that's interesting about reading the book is like the whole testing them, like the
Uh-huh.
Slugworth guy that kept showing up in the 70s one and like whispering in their ears. And I was like, we want you to steal some candy, blah, blah.
Mhm.
Like, that added like a little extra something like at risk, another interesting thing to that version. And
Mhm.
of course, it's not in the book. That's not a part of the story. And then, but it's interesting though, because then while you're watching that movie, you're like, how does he know where to go to get to like he just shows up, right? But
Right.
like it makes sense once you know that he works for Wonka. Then it's like, well, Wonka apparently he didn't just send them out randomly. He knew exactly where he sent them. Exactly. And so he had his guy there so he could, plant the seed and then see who was willing to steal from him. Because he still wanted to test that idea to see if could he even trust these kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I do like that because that's very interesting. Also the thing with the 70s one is Charlie does something wrong. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not in the book. It doesn't do
Right.
that in the book. The floating soda room scene isn't there.
Right.
It's not a thing. And there's nothing for him to repent of. There's nothing for him to redeem himself for. So I get, like, if you grew up with the one version, how you would appreciate that, like, that's another thing that makes Charlie different. Not just that he didn't do anything dumb while he was there, or that he's actually a nice person, or that he actually deserves to be there. It's also because when given the opportunity to take that gobstopper and go give it to the
Mm-hmm.
Slugworth guy, and even Grandpa Joe says, once his name wants a gobstopper, let's give it to him. Like, forget this guy, screw him.
Yeah.
Then Charlie's like, no, he turns around, even after being yelled at by Wonka, and gives it back to him. He's like, here you go. And there's something very poetic about that scene. And like, yes, it gives you chills when suddenly this guy that's been kind of fun and quirky this whole time suddenly is like, no, sir, blah, blah, blah. And like, he just so serious all of a sudden. And I don't know, it means so much more in that version when Charlie wins because yes, he did do something bad. Yes, he did make a mistake. But yes, he's willing to make it right. He's
Yeah.
willing to, admit, okay, I was wrong. And that makes him different. It's not
Yeah.
just that he didn't do anything wrong, he's actually made a sacrifice.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate that about that version. And that's some ways, kind of disappointed to find out that's not in the book. But it's like, okay, but it's
Yeah.
just one extra thing
Yeah.
that didn't
Well,
have to
and
be in the book.
I feel like it's in keeping with the whole theme going for because he is testing the kids. Like he even so he has the factory. He is betrayed by people within his own company,
Mm-hmm.
and so it makes sense that he's like, I, I'm hard pressed to trust again. And then he has all these kids that he's like, I wanted to go to a child. I knew that because they're going to be the only ones that have that like that innocent mindset. He's like, but honestly, do I give it to the child of the guy that owns the factory already? Do I give it to the kid that's so obsessed with chocolate that he'd probably just eat the factory down? Like who do I give it to? And he's like you do kind of get the sense that he's like, I want it to be you. I want it to be Charlie.
Mm-hmm.
But I gotta know that you're going to.
Yeah, you're trustworthy. That,
Yeah.
you
And
know.
so and so to have that moment of like, you see me at my worst, you see me when it is real, you see the betrayal that like it might seem like an overreaction to be screaming, you stole those drinks. That
Mm-hmm.
might be an overreaction, but this man had his life stolen from him in this exact same way.
Yeah.
It was a trigger for him. And to see that and to be like, oh yeah, he's a real person. This is a real thing.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I really like that.
Yeah.
So
So it's just funny though, is I consider both Gene Wilder and Johnny Depp great actors.
me too.
Like there's definitely a difference in how they do things. I feel like as far as Wonka is concerned, I feel like this is probably the weakest performance for Johnny
Hmm.
ever. And like, don't get me wrong, I still appreciate aspects of his portrayal, but I feel like they went almost too awkward. They
Yeah.
went a little too weird. That there was almost like they were trying too hard to be like, he's got father problems. And then, I mean, I did like aspects of things he said, like when he has a flashback. Sorry, I just had a flashback. Like he literally like said that like that, or like
Yeah.
that happened a lot. Increasingly today, and like there were moments about his weirdness that was funny, but like it was almost like it went a step too far. It was too awkward, a little too weird, and
Yeah.
like he was harder to like than the other Wonka, even though clearly that Wonka is a nut job too. Like, but still came off as a capable grown up person,
Yeah.
although totally nuts. Whereas like the Johnny Depp version, he feels like he's just a big kid and like he's got serious psychological problems. Like he seems like somebody on the spectrum who didn't have anybody to help them figure out how to deal with that. And so
Yeah.
they just made chocolate and isolated themselves from everybody.
Yeah.
And so then he brings people in for the first time and he's like, I don't know how to talk to people. And I
Yeah.
get that because there's moments where I feel like I'm like that. But I don't know. It's not as enduring as the Gene Wilder version.
It seems so to me, I feel like Wilder, he has a very good relationship with the camera. And
Hmm.
usually Johnny Depp does too. Like that's
Yeah.
the thing. Like you said, like this might be there are a couple of Johnny Depp films that I just don't like.
Hmm.
You know, there are just some of them that I just genuinely I don't like the film, I don't like the character, so I don't like but it doesn't mean that I think he did poorly at it. I just genuinely don't like that whole piece of
Yeah.
work,
It
right?
wasn't for you. Yeah.
Right. But his job within it was fine, you know.
Hmm.
But this is the one thing that I love this story and I love Johnny Depp and I love Tim Burton. And so I was expecting it to be
Yeah.
magical,
It seems like the perfect recipe. And like a lot of
Yeah.
things that Burton did, as far as like visually and like how he told the story, was great, was
Yeah.
wonderful. But like it feels like there's something a little off about the portrayal of the characters. Like
Yeah.
some even of the kids are a little off. Like my kids hate Mike TV in the new version. They're like he's too aggressive. He's too like he's not. The other kids felt more like he was obnoxious because he was so into television. But this
Hmm.
one's just obnoxious because he's into video games, and it's like, but there's a wide variety of video games too.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they didn't feel
And
like he was a good representation.
so to me, it seemed like the Johnny Depp version was the perfect stage performance.
Okay, yeah. It felt like a play instead of a
Yeah.
movie.
If it was a play, if this was like if it was exactly done the way Johnny Depp did this Willy Wonka on stage, it would be spectacular and we would all go away saying, I love this story,
It was
you
so
know?
much fun. Yeah.
But on camera, it's different. It's a different medium and it hits you different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was just a little too, that's what I was saying when I feel like they're kind of chewing the scenery. Even Johnny Depp was kind of chewing the scenery. He was kind of, look at me, I'm Willy Wonka and I'm really weird, you know, and you're
Yeah.
like, I don't need that. I don't need that from you.
Yeah.
Wilder's character, half the time, you almost couldn't hear him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, half the
And then
time
he's
he was
speaking in
like,
different languages randomly, and
yeah.
nobody knows what he's saying.
And his little one-offs, like what's the one that like when he like just leans over, uh, I think to Beauregard. I don't even remember which one,
Yeah,
but he's
to one
like,
of the parents.
candy is dandy, but liquor is quicker.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
you're kind of like, that was the candy man that just said that, but it
No,
speaks to
there is a
the
grown up in there somewhere.
yeah, like it speaks to the concept that like he is an actual person outside of the portrayal that you are getting right now. Like, you
Yeah,
know, and with Johnny Depp's version, it just felt cartoonish. It felt
very.
like a stage
Whereas, like,
production for cartoonish.
I feel like Wilder's version felt like, yeah, he's crazy. He's all over the place, but he accepts it as being completely normal.
Hmm.
He doesn't need their approval. He's not awkward around them. He doesn't care whether it makes any sense to them. He's totally fine. Whereas, like, Johnny Depp's version feels like he's very aware that he's awkward and he's very concerned about being awkward and being uncomfortable around these people. And, he feels insecure to me, like,
Hmm.
compared to the other one. The other one
Yeah.
felt like he was nuts and he was totally fine with it. This was normal to him, and there was nothing weird about what he's doing. He just expects everyone else just to keep up,
Hmm.
come on. And like, whereas the Johnny Depp one felt like there was a lot of awkward moments where he's like, I want you to think I'm cool, but I don't
Yeah.
know how to be cool. And I can see where they're going with that. It could have worked, but for some reason it doesn't quite. Like it's actually a really well made movie. It's really well done. There's a lot of things they did. They're actually really good. And the thing that was interesting about watching it again after reading the book, be like, this is the more accurate story. This one is more accurate to the book. And so I appreciated that. One thing I don't appreciate is the over CGI-ness, the kind of strange direction with Wonka himself
Hmm.
and the songs. I don't
Yeah.
like the modernized versions of the songs. Yes, I kept some of the lyrics, but like they were just all over the place. And don't get me wrong, I love Danny Elfman. I do generally love these three people working together.
Yeah.
And but for some reason it didn't work for me. Maybe it's also because he had the one dude playing all of the Oompa Loompas, which again I think is just I'm not into that. I'm into dwarves having jobs, playing parts that are classic dwarf parts and not taking that away from them. I mean, I don't know. It's more interesting to see physical people than a CGI character.
Yeah.
Now, even if it is a real person you CGI'd over and over and over again, there's still a sense of, but maybe that's what they're going for. They're going for this is a slightly off, this isn't slight right, like this is completely normal. And
Yeah.
that's what they were going for. But I don't know. But yeah, so I'm not a fan of the songs in the modern movie. No. Maybe just because partially because I grew up with the other ones. Um, but then you also have in the Gene Wilder one, they wrote some original songs for it too. So
Mhm.
you have the um Land of Imagination or the
Yeah.
that Gene Wilder sings, which is an awesome song, probably one of my favorite songs
Yeah.
of this whole franchise. Then the mom sings a song at some point, and then the grandpa sings a song where I've got to go with a dick and
Yeah.
all that. And so they made it more of like a full musical in
Yeah.
that version, which I feel like works better than having it be, it's not a musical, it's not a musical. And all of a sudden we have a musical going on in the second half of the movie. I feel
Yeah.
like it made it seem more natural that these guys are singing over here. Even if it was supposed to be kind of like their weird little quirk, you're used to it at this point. Whereas like the modern one, no music and then music.
Yeah.
And maybe again, that's what they wanted. They wanted to be off-putting and kind of weird and like, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Maybe
Yeah.
that's what they're going for. But
Yeah.
all right.
Well, and they put all the stuff in the back end of the movie, the all the stuff with Charlie says no and
Mm-hmm.
Wonka has to convince him and whatever to kind of balance that out a little bit. So
Yeah.
because like you said, it's all just Tim Burton, but serious for Tim Burton.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's a musical inside this crazy CGI world.
Yeah.
And then they kind of
Sort of mellowed it out.
yeah.
Yeah. So in a
Um
way, I like that version that Charlie like as much as I don't agree with all the choices for the Johnny Depp version of Wonka, I do like the thing that he's like, "Oh, come on, I'm gonna just take you. I'm gonna save you from this life." And he's like, "Well, no, not unless my family can come." I'm like,
yeah.
"Yeah, that's not true to the story, but I kind of like that because then it creates this conflict, and then
Yeah.
it requires Wonka to have to change and Wonka
Yeah.
to go, but wait, you're the perfect kid. You're the one I want,
Right.
but." You don't want to leave your family. And I don't understand that because I don't have a good family situation. And yes, there's things that are very silly about the whole dentist father and that somehow he picked up his whole house and moved it to a random nowhere, which at the same time, because I like Tim Burton, I can still enjoy the weirdness of that.
Yeah.
But like, I do still appreciate that they had the reconciliations, sort of, and
Yeah.
that when they went to his house, like Charlie looked around and he had all these clippings of everything that Willie had done, like all the different things about all his different shops and opening the factory, everything that was there. So it's like his dad, yeah, he didn't understand what he went off to do, but he still like respected him and he still was proud of him, even if
Right.
he didn't know how to be there for him.
Right.
So there's something really sweet about that. And that kind of makes you feel like in the end, when Willie's sitting at dinner with them and they're talking, work and everything, the mom's like, no, 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 no work at the table. It feels like a nice little ending. It has more like a bow tied around it kind of a
Yeah.
feel. And then you feel like, okay, so I can kind of forgive that he was all awkward and weird all this time because it went somewhere. He grew at the end too. It wasn't
Yeah.
just the kids that had to grow up. He had to too. So
Right.
there's so many things about the modern ones that's actually really good. It's just enough off that it's just yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I love and hate it. I don't know what to say. It's like
Yeah. Well, that's
it's
there are
probably the only Tim Burton movie I feel this way about.
I was gonna say there are things about it that I absolutely love, and there are things about it that I'm like, why? Why?
Why
You
did you
know,
do that? Yeah.
but I do know like there are a lot of instances when like you're like my favorite director, favorite, music,
Actor,
yeah,
favorite
some of
music,
my favorite actors,
composer, composer.
and you're like, it was so magical over here. I just expect it to be magical.
It seems like
And
a perfect idea on paper. Tim
right.
Burton, Johnny Depp, Danny Elfman, Willy Wonka Chocolate Factory. Sounds
Yep.
perfect, right? And then I don't know. I don't know. Like,
Almost honestly, it almost feels like they were trying too hard to be like the caricatures of themselves. You know what I mean?
yeah, they were trying too hard to
They just
make this
burned
whimsical
the
thing and it didn't work.
yeah. Like that was something that I don't remember who said it, but they were like, man, they burned the crap out of that movie.
They even Tim Burton it too much for Tim Burton.
Right.
Man.
Fact check true, I guess. Like but that's kind of unfortunate. But I love how organic the 70s version feels. And
Hmm.
part of that is like we kind of mentioned before, and I know they talked about it in Nostalgia Cast. I think I watched the same things that they were like, oh, I watched these making of, and I'm like, I think I watched the same things. Talking about the different, like when he's walking down the stairs, when he's singing that World
The
of Your
cane.
Imagination song, and he just goes whoosh, and he like
I love that.
whips
Every
his
time
and
cracks up.
they didn't show any of the actors the room.
Hmm.
They open the tiny door and it opens the whole wall and it's this giant door into this crazy room, right? They
Yeah.
didn't show any of them. So when they actually opened the door and stepped onto the set, those reactions were real. Like they were like, stay in character,
Oh.
but also feel your feelings. And that kind of like, whoa, like that was real.
Mhm.
And nobody knew that he was just gonna like suddenly like whack whack his walking stick out as they were and going up and down the stairs. He's walking down the stairs and then he goes back up.
They're like,
They're like, what do we do?
well,
That's
it makes
so
an authentic
organic because he
experience
didn't
then,
tell
because
anybody.
like Wilder is harnessing the unexpected, wild personality of Wonka in that moment. Even if he is doing it in a little more like mature, slightly more cynical
Understated.
way, it's still
Yeah.
like there's still the fun there. So what do
Yeah.
you think of Timothy in the Wonka movie?
So I know I know you have opinions. I actually really like him. Sometimes I've seen a lot of his work and I there are some things that I'm like, he was probably not the right pick for that spot.
Mm-hmm.
But I loved him in this. I absolutely adored him. I'm like, see, this is to me he's the guy that like you look at and you're like, why would you be so dumb? Why would you just fall for it? And he just has the whole like, it's okay, it'll will out. It'll end up right in the end, you
Yeah.
know, and you almost believe him. Like to me, like I think I said that with Gadsby. What's his name? I lost it. But how I was like, this is not the guy that I like risk my marriage for. And then he does that like look where he's like, man, you're the most important person in the world to me. And I'm like, I'm in. Okay, I believe you, you know.
Yeah.
And I felt the same way with Chalamet
Mm-hmm.
in as Wonka, like where I'm like, if anybody else did this, I'd you're stupid. And yet I'm like, but you know what? If anyone's gonna do it, it's gonna be you. Like, look at him. I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
he's endearing to me as Wonka. I said also he sings and dances like he's an awesome dancer, and so I'm like, okay.
You're like, you win. So like I had low expectations for the movie and I wasn't gonna watch it unless my kids forced me, and they did force me. I was gonna watch it again, but I didn't want to pay for it. So I was like, I'm not gonna watch it again. So I'm going off of what I remember from several months ago. Um, but it was far more charming than I was expecting it to be. Like, and there were only a couple parts in the movie where he did something where I was like, oh, not the bad delivery. Where like I remembered that I didn't like him. But like as overall, like it definitely feels like a different Wonka than the other two. Like they're obviously can't all be the same person because I
Mhm.
don't see this guy turning into either one of those guys. It's a funny notion to sit there and think about how it all could work together, but It really does feel like just a different Wonka, you know? And 'cause I have a hard time imagining Gene Wilder's Wonka ever being that dumb or
Mhm.
nice. But I also have a hard time imagining the Johnny Depp one ever like being that charming or like semi charming, anyways. So, like, as a movie, I think it's an interesting story. I like the whole chocolate cartel thing and like people trying to squash him and being like, no, you can't do this. Like, we're in charge. And I do love the whole police sergeant who's obsessed with chocolate that can be like bribed. And that whole part of the story was pretty funny. But like overall, I do like the story, but I do also feel like we didn't need this movie. I don't feel like it added that much to the Wonka verse
Mhm.
that I needed that story. I can understand the desire to want to have a background for Wonka because he's such an interesting, unusual character. You're like, how did this guy come to be? How did it all start? Like, you kind of want to see that. And like, I appreciate what they were trying to do with it. I think I would have liked to seen more of his life, like up to opening the factory, not just this one little incident part, you know?
Yeah.
Like part of me kind of wanted it to move along faster and like move past this part. But this was the story they're telling. They just wanted to tell how he broke into the business, not how he became the big guy. So I get that. There's some great as far as like the lady that owns the wash house is a great actress and whatever weird things she does, she's always really funny. And I liked the guy that worked for her and him trying to be like all sexy for her and try to get her
Yeah.
attention. That was pretty funny. Um, there were a lot of things that were entertaining and that I liked. And but then like overall, again, I feel like it's a good movie. It was well done. It was definitely better than I was expecting, but I didn't need this movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like it wasn't something you needed. I think it was something they wanted to do because they're like, well, this is a character everybody loves, and this is a world that everybody loves. Let's try to do it again because we want to make money, and let's try to just do a different take. Let's do a younger version.
Yeah.
And I get the desire to want to do that, but I don't think they need to do those things.
Yeah.
But Hollywood
So
doesn't care.
so what I'm about to say is mostly based on commentary of other like people like us, not necessarily based on the producers themselves or whatever. Because usually I'll watch the behind the scenes and whatever, or the making of, and or documentaries or whatever, and that's where I get my information. This time, there's not a lot. I mean, Wonka is still relatively new. There's not a lot of documentaries yet about that,
Yeah,
but just based on like interviews that individuals might have had or else commentary from other people, um apparently where the Johnny Depp, like there was an element of, hey, we could make money off of this. That is just true.
definitely. Yeah, that's
But
always
also the concept, I'm sorry, the concept that in the Johnny Depp version, they gave Wonka a backstory. They almost justified why they redid it. Why did you retell the story? And why did you make it so different? And so they justified it in their own backstory,
hmm
you know? And Wonka is supposed to be the Gene Wilder's Wonka because like they're like, here's our backstory, and it is with like I was kind of mentioning earlier, the concept of like that's if he grew up with his dad. If he grew up with his dad, he lives in Tim Burton universe. But
yeah,
if he grows up with his mom, like they use some of the same music, the
hmm
iconic music from the first film,
yeah,
the Oompa Loompa, which that might be my least favorite part of the entire film
yeah.
is that they used oh, what's his name? Mickey Blue Eyes.
Hugh Grant.
Hugh Grant.
Yeah.
Mickey
So
Blue
he's not
Eyes.
even a dwarf this time. So at least in the Giant Depp one, it was a dwarf still.
Right.
This time
And
it's a regular person as a
yeah,
dwarf, and like I
and
did not appreciate that Oompa Loompa at all. I was
I
like,
didn't I
why?
didn't like it. I didn't like the character. I didn't like the portrayal. I didn't like that it was Hugh Grant, that it could have been anybody, like
Yeah, I mean, I like
but
Hugh Grant fine and plenty other things. I just don't like what they did with it. I think it was a bad
yeah.
idea. That's
So
probably
that
my
that was
biggest
that was
criticism
like
of it.
my least favorite part of the whole thing. But that Oompa Loompa looks practically identical to the Oompa Loompas of the Gene Wilder film, and like his entire look is
Mm-hmm.
as replicated as possible, all on purpose. It's all to be like, you gave your version of the backstory. Here's our version of the backstory.
Okay.
And they also infused him with a little magic
Okay.
because um, Gene Wilder's Wonka exists in our universe. It exists in our reality. Johnny Depp's Wonka is not our universe. That it has its own magic. It is so different. It is, like you said, it's almost off-putting the way that it is just so out of our world.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted the magical element put back into Wonka's story. And so Wonka in his youth has a magic to him, but it still feels like it fits more in our universe. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
Like it feels more like our world where they're like, how does he do it? Noodle. She's like, I don't know how he does it, but for whatever reason, I believe you. Like,
Yeah.
and that was kind of on purpose to bring the magic into Wonka and also to give him his backstory that that is supposed to show you like where he comes from, because even that Wonka, he knows when you're being like even when he's singing his opening song and he breaks the pump, he drops a pumpkin and she's like, that'll be 3 sovereigns, and he's like, their prices are suspiciously high, or whatever he says. He says something about the
Mm.
price being suspiciously high. And so you understand, and like how the kid keeps trying to like shine his shoes or whatever. And, can I brush your coat off for you? And he's like, no, get away from me. He's like running away from the kid, all to kind of show like he's not an idiot,
Mm-hmm.
but he just has this like overwhelming optimism and sense of like, I can make things okay.
Mm-hmm.
Even when you're totally taking advantage of me, I will make this okay. Because he has that little bit of magic that he may not even recognize as magic. You know what I mean? And so for that, I like it. And it is just super entertaining. Super
Yeah.
entertaining. I agree. It wasn't necessary, but since it's here anyway, I'm super entertained by it.
They did a good job putting it together overall. It's good production value. So
Yeah.
I like that. One thing I found interesting is I listened to this on Audible and I noticed that apparently there is a book called Wonka by Roald Dahl. And there's another book called Charlie and the Glass Elevator. So there's like a sequel. So there's other books. So now I feel like I gotta go read the Wonka book and find out if that's where the inspiration for the Wonka movie came from or if it's completely different.
I didn't know that. So yeah,
Um,
now I want to too.
Now I'm like, I have to read Charlie and the Glass Elevator too, because like there's more to the story. I feel like, well, I gotta read it. Overall, I love this universe. I love the idea of this chocolate man, chocolatier. I also, the kids and I, when we watched the 70s one, were like, I want an old fashioned candy store
Yeah.
like that. And they're like, the nicest guy in the world runs it, and he's like giving out free candy.
So about that, I never noticed until my daughter pointed it out. But at one point he opens up the thing and he
Kitchen.
totally whacks a girl in the face.
Oh, he whacked a girl in the face? What?
Yes. I was like, no, he doesn't. And we took it back and we watched it again. He totally biffs her right in the face.
Weird. Yeah, I thought it was weird that he was letting kids back behind the counter. I'm like, he's already being
Yeah.
super generous. And now he's just letting them just take over the whole store. And I'm like, who's this guy?
He must be like, their parents are loaded. Come on in, kids.
Come on in, guys. And that's why Charlie doesn't go in because, he doesn't have any money. They
Right.
check to see if you have money first to walk in
Well,
the door.
it does kind of speak to that, like, when you're poor, because you and I have both been there, that like it feels like everyone else just gets everything,
Hmm.
like maybe the reality was that the kids just came in and they're like, hey, candy, candy. And he's like, all right, here you go. All right, get out of here. But in Charlie's mind, when Charlie's looking through the window, he's like, the candy man, and he's letting him back in and take everything you want, children. Like,
Yeah.
Charlie's version of reality is they get everything and I'm out in the cold.
Yeah.
You know?
But it is possible. It's possible that the guy's not really doing all those things. That's just how Charlie sees it.
Yeah.
But anyways, I do love that candy store. And I love old fashioned candy stores. I've been to a few back when there were some still wandering about. But like I would love to have that kind of candy store and like to go hang out. So yeah, that's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. We could actually continue from another series that we have started reading.
Yeah.
Maybe we could do the second Harry Potter book.
I was actually thinking of that, bringing that up on my turn, but I like
There
doing
you
it
go.
right now.
All right, so we're gonna do J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets next time. Because we just spontaneously decided that's what we're doing. And yeah, sounds good. So for Paperback Flicks, I'm Ruth Craddock.
I'm Rae Davidson.
And we will see you guys next time.